The idea of a unicorn is that you're perfect, and nobody is perfect. We know that. In this hiring market, everybody is scared of layoffs, of getting let go. And so in particular, hiring managers are looking for the perfect fit because they want the lowest risk hire. And so your job as a candidate is not necessarily to be a unicorn.
If I break down the job search process into 5 steps, you have clarity. Then to me, you have like visibility, which in there includes like your LinkedIn, your resume, right? Then you have networking, then you have interviewing, and then you have salary negotiation, I think, right? So what most job seekers that I see do is they skip clarity and they go into just applying to jobs, and it becomes more of a numbers game.
And so I'm sure that a lot of your clients have experienced layoffs, or even if they haven't, just rejections. I am really curious to know, how do you keep them motivated on the slow days or the slow weeks, the slow months that happen in the job search?
Welcome back to a new episode of the How to Get a Job podcast. Today, we have an amazing episode in store for both of you. Ellie's back, our co-host. This is our 3rd episode together, and we have our special guest, Josh Bob. Welcome, guys. How are you guys?
Doing well. Josh Bob is one of my favorite career coaches in the world, so I'm really happy to be here.
Thank you. The feeling is more than mutual. I love hanging out with you guys, so I'm just excited to get to spend some time.
Yeah.
No, thanks for being here, Josh. I agree with Ellie. When we met in Orlando, it's when I got to even know even more about you and learn more from you, and the passion of, like, first of all, your humor to a next level. You were like the dad of the Airbnb cooking us breakfast. It was freaking phenomenal. And then, but even more about that, it's like I think arguably you're probably one of the best coaches that I've ever seen. And so like so yes, when we were talking about, when we were like, we restarted the podcast, we have Ellie become the co-host, and I was like, Ellie, who do you want to bring in? And by the way, we have a lot of, as you know, a lot of friends of Opni that we could bring in that have like so many followers, but it was like a no-brainer. Let's bring Josh early. We love him. He's awesome. So excited to be here.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
I when we were talking down in Orlando, the concept kept coming up, and that mostly means I kept bringing it up, of like this Franken-coach idea. And it applies way beyond coaching, but like the idea of everybody is really good at something. If you can find that one thing and learn from them, you can get better. And so I've been meeting with Dan the Man, every other week since then to learn marketing from him. And he's been actually asking me questions about coaching. And it's like, this guy is an immensely powerful marketing force unto himself. And the fact that he's asking me for my expertise is just amazing.
But to your point, like, he's an amazing marketer and he's a good coach. And so like him learning how to be a great, even better coach for his clients, and then you learn to be a better marketer, which then attracts more people so that you can impact more people. It's a win-win, right? It's the same thing of like, yes, I could do this podcast by myself, but as you saw how Ellie just took control of the room and we were all there and the questions and she did it, it was like, this podcast is good, but it could be great if Ellie was in it. So yeah.
Or
Thanks
for herself.
Yeah.
And no, you're exactly right. And also, I want to get in on those calls, please, so I can learn marketing and coaching from each of you. Maybe I can teach you guys how to do your hair or something, but I gotta provide my own strengths. Just kidding. But yeah, I mean, I will always remember the most memorable car ride to an airport in my entire life was the car ride to the airport that we had together when we were leaving Orlando, which was like a really sad day for me. But so unbelievably memorable because it was like, we had spent a lot of time together in Orlando, but it was just us two in close quarters, like trying to get out all the last things that we wanted to say before we had to fly back home. And yeah, I think about that all the time. So Very, very happy to have you here. I want to get into your story and, how you became this incredible coach that you are. In your story, you have talked about how you became a career coach after hiring a career coach yourself, and that career coach telling you, hey, I think you might actually be really good at this someday. And so I want to start out, and this is going to be really helpful for our listeners too, who are often job seekers. This is the How to Get a Job podcast. Why did you seek a coach? What was the pain you were experiencing?
It's a great question. I was a product manager. So in 2009, I started a company. Didn't necessarily know what I was doing then. Not sure I still know what I'm doing now, but we'll leave that aside. And spent 4 years running a software company. And the biggest thing I took away from that was that I really, really enjoyed product management. So I spent the next 8-10 years or so doing product management for companies like Experian and TripAdvisor and a few startups. And after a third layoff in 3 years, I was like, okay, I'm clearly expendable. Best job advice I've ever gotten was make yourself indispensable, non-expendable. And so clearly I hadn't done that, which to me said, I'm doing something wrong at my job. How do I get better? And after trying to get better, I realized maybe I'm just not a great product manager. So I dug into it, realized that there were a couple of key pieces that I was missing. And rather than say, okay, I'm going to get better at those things, then I was able to say, okay, let me see what I can pivot to and move on to the next opportunity while doing the things in product that I'm good at and not doing the things that I'm not. And to do that, I felt, let me get a career coach. Let me talk to somebody who can help me understand the options out there, the lay of the land, and what I can do better in order to be more successful in my career. And so we talked it through. He went through some what we would call clarity sessions with me, like deep stuff. Where have you been successful in your career? What went into being successful? Why were you the person who could do that the best? And established that I'm great at working with people. I'm great at teaching people things and helping them understand how to do more of the things that they love. And I'm not great at coming up with vision for how do I solve this problem. I can implement it, but I'm not great at the vision, which is a key piece of product management. And what is product without vision? It's a lot of what customer success is. And so I worked with him to kind of focus in on customer success, found a role that was really perfect for me, and was there for about 2.5 years before the company went under through, I would hope, no fault of my own.
Okay. So you mentioned one big breakthrough that you had, which was making yourself indispensable. What else did you learn from your coaching experience that really changed things for you? And then maybe double barrel question, if I may, how have you implemented that into your own coaching practice with your own clients?
Sure. So I would say the biggest takeaway was, number one, like I said, my dad's advice, make yourself indispensable. And clearly I hadn't done that. I wanted to dig into that. Two, it was, there are pieces of every job. And for the most part, there are jobs out there that incorporate some of those pieces, but not others. So like customer success is product in many ways without the vision and maybe much more one-to-one instead of one-to-many. There are jobs out there that involve software engineering skills, but don't necessarily involve writing code, right? The problem solving and architecting and things like that, but not writing the code. And so what I learned, what I really took away is, if you want to do something, if you're really good at something and not good at other pieces of it, try to find a job that leverages the best parts of yourself. And that's something that I've really tried to bring into play with my clients, is really understanding what they're really good at. I'm saying really a lot, really. What they're good at, and finding the role that suits them, where they are, for lack of a better term, they are the unicorn at that role because they fit all of the pieces perfectly, instead of trying to say you've got 7 out of 10 pieces we can shoehorn the 8th in, and then we're really going to have to shove those last 2 pieces in to make it fit.
You mentioned the unicorn thing. Can you share with our listeners your unicorn analogy, if you will?
All right, so I'm going to start by showing you this. You guys probably recognize this guy.
Did you steal it from the house?
I did not steal it.
Okay.
I ordered it for $3.70 from China. But it was the same thing. It was a pink pink ice cream cone at the house. But I liked it so much that I got it. The idea of a unicorn is that you're perfect, and nobody is perfect. We know that. But the problem is that in this day and age, that sounds very poetic, in this hiring market, everybody is scared of layoffs, of getting let go. And so in particular, hiring managers are looking for the perfect fit because they want the lowest risk hire. And so your job as a candidate is not necessarily to be a unicorn, because like I said, nobody's a unicorn, but it's to present yourself as a unicorn. And if that means shoving the ice cream cone on your head and sprinkling the glitter on your back, then so be it. It's not about lying. It's about presenting the pieces of yourself that show that you're perfect for the role in individual parts.
I want to ask some thoughts and then ask you a question, Josh. One of you guys, a couple of things. Disclaimer: if you're listening to this podcast and this is the first time you hear of me, you will know that I reference Alex Hormozi a lot because I love Alex Hormozi, right? And on his Instagram, even before we started, he was talking about Alex Hormozi talks about the concept of working things backwards. Like, if you know what it takes to be broke, if you do the opposite of that, you'll be rich, right? If you know what it takes to be a bad employee, if you do the opposite of that, you'll be a good employee, right? So he was talking about, like, here's how to be broke. And that reminded me about a concept that his team, so I went to Vegas, and one of the things they talked about is like how to sell the company, but then they work it backwards. Like, here's how to make a company that doesn't sell. And one of the things is when you have a unicorn employee, because it's called key man risk. If you have your company is attached to the owner, no one's going to want to buy it because Daniel's the face, he's the salesperson, he's the coach, he's doing all of that. So it just makes it not right. So work that backwards. I love that analogy. It's like, if you can become the unicorn for someone, it makes it a no-brainer for them to hire you. Your job security is off the roof. I'm like, yes, that company might not be able to be sold, but that's not your problem as an employee. The good news is that you have a lot of job security. You have a lot of leverage on negotiation salary. You have a lot of growth opportunities. You can, and it's not about holding them hostage. I think it's ultimately growing with the company and having those opportunities. But I think I love that analogy that you're sharing of the unicorn. And it's like, when I think about it backwards, it's like my best employees, Salome. I can't run this business without her anymore. It would not be Opni. It would be a different business.
Right. And that's the key is that's part of being indispensable. But if you look at it on the flip side, it's you are the person who can come in and hit the ground running on day 2. We'll give you day 1 so that you can, read the handbook or whatever. So day 2, you come in and you've already done this job. So you know exactly how to do it. You may not have been at a competitor at this level in this specific space, but you've done all the pieces of the job and you don't have to be trained on anything except how to do the job at this company.
A couple of things if I'm playing devil's advocate, right?
Yeah.
My concern is that if I am a unicorn, if I'm so perfect and I'm overqualified for the job, that also means the reason why I'm not hired, because people are going to be like, well, you're going to leave in the next 6 months when Google comes knocking at the door because I can't compete with Google's name or compensation package.
Fair. First of all, I can understand how that would be a fear for you. You are certainly too perfect for every job. But more importantly, the idea is that was a problem 5 years ago. 5 years ago, people wanted a 70% match who had room to grow into a 100% match because it was all about getting somebody who had potential and could be really, really great. Now they want somebody who's a 95% match with no growth room, with a little bit of growth room, doesn't really matter, because the idea is they just need somebody who makes them look good, who makes them look smart for having hired them. Because Think of all the middle managers that got knocked out in that Meta layoff the other day. Think of all the middle managers who've been squished from director with an organization below them to an individual contributor director, or to basically managing a team of 2. There are so many out there that there's no room for them to bring on somebody who is a mistake. And if you can't make a mistake in hiring, you're going to take the lowest risk candidate. You're going to pay a little bit more potentially. You're going to go out and feel that they are the right person, but they're not going to leave necessarily because the economy is terrible and there are so many competitors for every job. So your only goal is to bring them in and just get them to work as fast as possible.
You actually are already getting to one of my next questions, which was about the low risk hire. I know you're a fan of it. I think you explain it exceptionally well. You just did just now. And one thing I really loved when I had heard you explain it was you were like, it makes logical sense that they would want the most qualified hire, right? But no, they actually want the lowest risk hire right now. And if you want to maybe expand on that a little bit more, just for our listener who's like, wait, I thought I had to present myself as the most qualified. Now I have to present myself as the lowest risk. What do you mean by that? What does that look like? So expand on that a little bit for us if you can.
Sure, happy to. So the lowest risk hire is the person who, like I said, takes the least amount of effort to get up to speed and contributing at the highest possible level. Mm-hmm. So imagine if you work for, I'm going to not pick a FANG company deliberately, like you work for Expedia, right? You are, let's pick a product manager at Expedia, and you have been working on their flights for a while, right? And now Google is going to hire for a flights product manager. Who are they going to hire? Are they going to hire somebody who has been a product manager for 5 years, has super potential, but has been in healthcare? Or are they going to hire somebody who has been at Expedia for 5 years in the role, doing flights, doing all of the things that they need, and they just have to teach them how to be googly, or whatever the hell they call themselves. Like how to teach, they just have to go and teach this person how to work at Google, because they already know flights. They already know all the APIs that they're going to get from the third parties. They already know, they have relationships at those third parties. And so they have already built all of the things that they're going to build. They just need to build it again for Google. That is low risk. And so if the hiring manager is looking for an opportunity to demonstrate why they are valuable to the company, and they certainly are, then they are going to absolutely be focused on how do they get this person to contribution as quickly as possible. And if they're going to contribute as quickly as possible, it means they've already done the job.
Could you make an argument for the healthcare person? Let's say the healthcare person's your client. They want this Expedia, they want this Google role. They don't have necessarily the flight experience. How could they present themselves as a low risk hire? Obviously, we can't know that there's somebody else in the pipeline who's like a perfect fit. Let's say we don't know that, or maybe that's not even happening. How could that healthcare person also present themselves as low risk?
Yeah, so there are a couple of factors there. The first is, if this person is my client, I am probably helping to gently nudge them away from the opportunity at Google because they're not the low risk hire there. That said, can you present yourself as the lower risk hire? Sure, you certainly can, by showing, and goes back to sort of the pieces analogy. There's this story joke, I don't know, about 3 blind people and an elephant, right? And one of them feels the trunk and says, oh, this is a snake. And one of them feels a leg and says, oh, this is a tree. Get your mind out of the gutter, Daniel. And one of them feels the tail and says, oh, this is a horse. And they're all wrong, but within their own frame of reference, they're all sort of right. But if they pooled their information, they'd get the full picture and feel like, oh, okay, this is an elephant. And sort of the same thing. If you have healthcare experience, but it's at a huge company, right? You've worked for, I don't know, United Healthcare, or you've built healthcare for Meta. Well, that's a terrible idea. But like, whatever it is, if you've done the scale individually, talk about the scale. If you've done the responsibilities individually, talk about the responsibilities. If you've done each of the individual pieces, then talk about them as if they are the elephant instead of talking about those individual pieces. And that at least can present the idea that you're the unicorn, even if they might look closer and see that you've got an ice cream cone on your head. Maybe they won't look closely enough.
This is why you're such a good coach, though, because you're so realistic. Like, you would say, if this was my client, I would actually probably steer them in a different direction. I love that. And then I also love the way that you describe that analogy, and sorry for Daniel and I's childish giggles, but, but the way you describe that analogy, let's see how it is possible. What could you do? And like the idea of the scale, like that totally makes sense. Like maybe you did it for another ginormous business. So then your experience working at a ginormous business is what's going to set you apart and make you the unicorn that they're looking for. God, that's so good. This is why we love you.
Yeah, Josh, I have a question here to dive deeper into one of the aspects. I think one of the things that you were talking about is like finding a place where you are a low risk hire, right? Where you can become the unicorn. But in my experience, what I see most job seekers do is that they skip. If I break down the job search process into 5 steps, you have clarity. Then to me, you have like visibility, which in there includes like your LinkedIn, your resume, right? Then you have networking, then you have interviewing, and then you have salary negotiation, I think, right? So what most job seekers that I see do, especially the ones that got laid off or got fired, that are just desperate to get the next job, is they skip clarity and they go into just applying to jobs, and it becomes more of a numbers game. But when you're just blindly applying to any job that's available, hit an easy apply button, maybe even using one of those new AI tools that applies for you, it's going to be very hard for you to find the job where you can become a unicorn. Have you seen that? If you have, like, what advice or perspective you have in that when people are skipping clarity?
Yeah, don't. And so the key from my perspective is twofold. One, I would make the argument that there's a 6th phase that comes after clarity and before the applications, which is narrative. It is understanding your story and how you bring skills that can do the job, right? And it doesn't have to be that unique job, although it should be, right? If you're doing Tell Me About Yourself, you should be saying, I've done this job. But ultimately, you are telling the story that demonstrates your skill set as it pertains exactly to that job, so that you can show you've done it, you'll hit the ground running, all the things the hiring manager wants. And so if you are skipping that phase, if you are skipping the clarity phase, then what you're basically doing is cooking a bunch of spaghetti and throwing it against the wall and hoping something sticks, which is fine. It's just not going to work. It might have worked 5 years ago, right? Like pre-pandemic, or even 2021, when like everybody was hiring their mother and everyone else just to, fill the coffers. But like the market has changed so drastically with, what is it, 1 million tech layoffs in the last 3 years, some ungodly number. Like, you've got to be close enough to hit the mark. So it's not good enough for you to just throw that spaghetti. You've got to actually be aiming the spaghetti. The analogy breaks down.
Yeah, and I'll let you ask your question, but like, it's so interesting to me when people are like, Daniel, but this is how I've gotten the last 3 jobs. And I'm like, it's not that you won't get a job. You will eventually get a job. But is it the job where you're actually fulfilled, enjoy doing? Is it the job that's actually compensating you fairly based on the skill set that you possess? Is it a job that you actually can see yourself building a career? And it's not just a job, because there's a difference between a job and a career. And I think when people skip clarity, the odds of them finding a job where they feel valued, that they are enjoying their work, that they're getting compensated correctly, are dramatically lower versus doing clarity correctly.
Yeah, and I'm going to take that a step further, though, Daniel, and say I've got an amazing client who is super smart. He's been VP of customer success for a major company, public company, for 8-10 years, got laid off, and he is currently making ends meet by being a real estate agent. I've got somebody else who was CEO of a company that sold to a public company, who was VP of marketing for that public company and is currently at a restaurant, because the market has changed so fundamentally that you might be able to get a job if you keep throwing the spaghetti against the wall, but it certainly won't be a fulfilling job. And I'm not sure you actually will be able to get one, because they're looking for the unicorn, and you've got to tell your story well.
Yeah, love it.
You've talked a lot here about layoffs, and you've talked about your own personal experience being laid off. One of the things that I also like about you, and I'm sorry that I'm turning this into the Josh Bob compliment corner, but one of the things I also really like about you is that you are so inspirational. And so I'm sure that a lot of your clients have experienced layoffs, or even if they haven't, just rejections. I am really curious to know, how do you keep them motivated on the slow days or the slow weeks, the slow months that happen in the job search?
Well, first of all, I want to promise that I'll get a recording of this, because I need to play this over and over to my wife. But that's a different story. I'm just kidding, honey. She's probably listening. So how do I stay, how do I keep my students, my clients positive? It's a slog for them. And I get that, because I've been through it. I've been through way more layoffs than I'd ever care to admit. I'm not certain other coaches who talk about how many times they've been fired as a badge of honor. But the idea of having to base your self-worth on your job and then losing your job is not at all foreign to me. And the difference for me is that the position that I'm coming from is one where I understand the scope of the market better than they do. They see a very narrow band. They see a very narrow understanding of what's in front of them. And I see a much broader view, because I see all of my clients, and I see the clients for the company I consult with, and all of the people who are landing jobs. And so there is light at the end of the tunnel, but it can look very, very dark when you're in the tunnel. So one of the things that I do is help them with their mindset. So mindset coaching is a big thing. I'm not the world's best mindset coach. There's the Josh Bob Insult Hour right there. But I have friends who are fantastic. They've helped me. And if I can't help one of my clients, I will absolutely send them to a mindset coach, talking about, how do you inhabit your best self? How do you get to understand the things about yourself that are great, and where you excel, and how you can bring those to your next opportunity, and how you can inhabit your best mindset, so that when you walk in the door, or the virtual door, you're able to say, yeah, I'm ready, I'm confident, and I'm going to get this job. And if you don't, it doesn't affect your self-worth, at least not for more than a blip. It's tough. Everybody is feeling it who's on this job market right now. I talked to a bunch of folks this afternoon, and one of them had applied for 3,000 jobs in the last 18 months. 3,000. I was speechless. In front of a group of people, I was speechless, because I'd never heard of anybody with more than 500. And this was 6 times that.
Yeah. I wonder if he used an AI tool. But anyways, regardless, he probably skipped clarity. He most likely he skipped clarity, and that's what happens, right? But awesome. Yeah, it is tough to, whether it's finding a job, starting a business, anytime you're trying to achieve a big goal, right? It is going to be tough. And I think that's why it's really important to have a community around it, right? Like, we have community of career coaches around it. We have a community of job seekers. I think that's really important. Josh, what advice? So I love, one of the things that you said is what the market was pre-COVID, post-COVID, and now are 3 different markets that we've experienced. What do you think are some of the biggest things that job seekers today in 2025 should take into account that you maybe haven't mentioned, aside from saying you got to find the perfect unicorn role?
Sure. So the first is absolutely about storytelling. And you guys know me, I'm big on storytelling. I like to tell the story of how I started out calling myself a storytelling coach, and then somebody asked me about the Three Little Pigs, and there went that idea. But the idea of knowing the value that you bring and being able to convey it, but being able to convey it in a way that solves problems. I found this problem. Here are the actions I took. It had this result. It's star storytelling, star format storytelling, no question. But being able to show those skills and how you can walk the interviewer from point A, problem, to point B, solution, using your individual skills and actions is huge. So that's number one. Number two is helping people to understand the value that the interviewer brings, i.e., what you can learn from the interviewer that you might be able to take into the next round. So, for example, my favorite question that I tell my clients to ask is, what are the challenges? What are the biggest problems facing your team right now? Better yet, if you can ask it of somebody else, network in and ask somebody on the team before you even talk to the hiring manager, you're golden, because it gives you the opportunity to present yourself as someone who can solve that problem. And you become much closer to that unicorn, and you're almost like a psychic. They're like, whoa, how did you know? That's amazing. If you can do that, all of a sudden you become that much better of a candidate. So in 2025, we're looking at a job market that is super saturated with amazing candidates, right? That are super saturated with great candidates who have the pedigree. 4,000 people from Meta, thank you. All of a sudden, now you've got 4,000 people vying for the same jobs that they weren't vying for a week ago, and they've got Meta on their resume, the whole low performer baloney aside. And you've got to basically be able to say, I'm better than that person. And in order to do that, you need to know how you can solve the problems that the hiring manager is experiencing. And if you can pitch that, you've got a much better chance. It's not spaghetti against the wall. It's a very highly targeted sniper rifle.
Yeah. One of the things I've heard when I've said that to others is like, well, I'm not really problem solving in my role. Like, I'm just kind of an administrator. Like, I'm not really doing anything. My answer to that is always, they're not posting a job for fun. Like, they're posting a job because there's problems to be solved. And sometimes even that problem is just, we have an overwhelming amount of work that needs to get done, and we need somebody to do it. So if that's your pitch, hey, that's better than just, I want a job. I'm curious though, a lot of the folks you're working with, what kind of problems are they solving?
Great question. So I work with pretty much exclusively folks who are in technology and are tech specific or tech adjacent. So I wouldn't necessarily work mostly with salespeople. They're not really adjacent to the tech enough, but customer success is kind of where it starts. And then into the iron triangle, so to speak, probably misusing that term, but of product design and engineering, and project management, program management. Those are predominantly who I work with. And the problems that they are solving are customer problems. They're not necessarily business problems, because customer problems are business problems. I think I just negated what I said, but you get the idea. So if you can take things back to what is the business problem, and then how does that affect the customer? And you can say, I am solving this problem for the business. There's an overabundance of paperwork. Okay, what does that mean for the customer? Well, if there's too much paperwork, it gets backed up. If it gets backed up, then the customers don't get their widgets fast enough, or they don't get customer service fast enough. If it gets backed up and they don't get service fast enough, they leave. That's a business problem caused by a customer problem. And so now the fact that you can come in and do the paperwork quickly and efficiently and correctly all of a sudden means that you will help the customers get served faster, not churn away from the business. You'll help the company save money worth way more than your salary. There's your story.
Yeah, downstream impact.
Yeah, every role in the organization either makes the company money, saves the company money, or a combination. And if you can show them how you bring a return on investment, then ultimately you become a low risk hire, like you mentioned. Absolutely. Josh, this has been really awesome. If people want to learn more about what you do, how you work with job seekers, tell us a little bit more about Career Vision Coaching, what you do, and how they can get a hold of you.
Happy to. Thank you for the opportunity. So
Yeah.
I work, like I said, with tech folks, mostly mid-career. I would say 7-8 years in to 25 plus years in. You can check more out at linkedin.com/in/Josh Bob or careervision.coach. Yes, .coach is a real top-level domain. What I do is exactly what you were saying, Daniel. I start with clarity, and then I have an extra phase of strategy. It's what do you want to do with your life and where do you want to do it? What level do you want to do it? What are the right companies? That's strategy. And then build out that narrative. So how do you tell that story? And how do you tell it consistently? And how do you tell it well? And then work together until you get that job. So it's a lot of fun. Like Ellie said, like you said, Daniel, I bring that sense of humor. I also try to crack the whip a little bit. That's one of the appeals of working with a coach, is that you've got someone to be an accountability partner. I think I do that pretty well. So that's what I bring. Careervision.coach or LinkedIn/Josh Bob. Those are how you can find me.
Josh Bob, everyone. Yes. Josh, you're awesome. Thank you so much for being here. We will put those links to your LinkedIn as well as your website in the show notes. If you're listening to this and you haven't already liked and subscribed to this podcast, what are you waiting for?
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 Like right now. Don't forget to leave us a review on Spotify or Apple, and we'll see you all on the next episode. Bye, everyone.
Bye, all.